so much. That was a piece called Träume by Richard Wagner, arranged for viola by William Primrose, one of our viola's most leading advocates. So it was the final lesson of my first year at Curtis. I had arrived on a plane from Houston just 9 months before and was now standing before Roberto Diaz, president of the Curtis Institute and my teacher, waiting for comments on my rendition of Schumann's Märchenbilder. You have the basic tools to make music, he said, and yet your playing is generic. It's nice, it's fine, but you do nothing to differentiate your Bach from your Schumann, from the Vieuxtemps that you're playing. How are they different? Why are they different? What makes the composer come alive? Why did the composer choose to make these particular marks on the page? Why this note here, not there? How does it reflect him as a person? And more importantly, what can you express through these markings? Why is it important to us that you're playing and not someone else? Could be anyone. What do you personally have to offer? What do people know about you after you've played? Because of how you play. Do you reveal yourself through your music? If you reveal nothing, then why play? The viola is your medium, an experiment to find expression. Paint the picture in your mind. You must first have a clear picture in your own mind, then figure out a way to communicate that to others. Well, create it on your instrument, and then through that communicate it to others. By experimenting, he said, you'll develop chops that you'd never find otherwise. Like stepping out of your house in the morning, you must always know where you're going and why. Otherwise, why go anywhere? Dig deep under the surface. It isn't easy. Now you have to figure things out for yourself. It's a process that will take time, that is much more difficult, but also much more rewarding. No more imitation. An audience can smell that from miles away. No more regurgitation. You must look inside. Where to begin? From humble roots, I suppose. I grew up musically from the ground up, not from great talent, but from long hours of consistent practicing and exposure to great teachers and artists. Beginning to study the viola at age 6, I never dreamed this would be my profession. I was going to be a doctor, or at least something respectable. By age 12, I was attending summer camps and festivals for longer and longer periods of time, studying with famous teachers and collaborating with talented students. My eyes were open to what music really was, to the level of playing out there, not just to what I heard in my local orchestra. I heard what incredible things were possible on my instrument alone, and then in collaboration with others, particularly in chamber music. I remember playing Schubert's double cello quintet, which you may know, in a hall in Quebec for the first time, and feeling myself in the midst of this massive, rich, dark cello sound as it reverberated through the hall. It was perhaps the beginning of an addiction, something I wanted to taste again and again. Not sure about music professionally still, but certainly not able to stop. I attended Rice University in Houston to study pre-med, German literature, and yes, viola performance. With the thirst for travel and adventure, every summer I would do research, find festivals to attend, and then find a way for the university to fund my travel so that I could see the world, literally, and also other musical worlds. I studied with people from England, Russia, Austria, Germany, Italy, all over, people who had been schooled in other traditions and offered me new perspectives through their cultural insights. My mind was opened to the vast array of musical possibilities beyond what I had known. Varieties of sounds, possible characters, immense color and timbral changes. The more I experienced working with these musicians, the more motivated I was to search within and to find what I could do. I wanted to be able to create the beauty of sound that they produced, thinking about going into music professionally, I still had no idea what I would actually do to make a living. But again, I couldn't stop. So I said, perhaps it was an addiction, and perhaps it was the Lord leading me in this direction. He certainly did guide me, as at the end of my senior year, I realized I had a degree in music and still didn't know what I was going to do. Some of you might be there right now. So I decided to pass on med school and apply to grad school in music. I only planned to take 2 auditions. I had said, Lord, if you want me to get into music, open these doors, and if they open, I'll walk through, and I'll trust that this is what you want. I only took 1 audition here in Philadelphia. The audition was probably the most stressful musical experience I've ever had. The repertoire is enormous that they require, about an hour and a half of music. You walk in and it's buzzing, with 40 people competing for 3 spots, and they give you 5 minutes. So here they pick snippets of all this music you have prepared. So I did that, and then a grueling half-hour second round, grilled by a panel of 8 men, all sitting there telling you to play faster, play slower, try it this way, try that way. Anyway, I knew at the end of that if somehow I did get in, it would definitely be of the Lord and nothing I had done. So here I am, came to Curtis. After 3 years there, I'm still in Philadelphia, married to my wonderful husband, and pursuing a career in music. It's different than I had expected, but then I didn't know really what I was expecting. So I trust that the Lord led me here, and that as my career continues, He'll lead me each step. So that's my history, kind of in a nutshell. And I want to talk a little bit today about some things that I think are a real challenge to a lot of artists. And that is the difference between pride and confidence, particularly on stage. I think we find a lot with artists that's a very fine line. You have to have confidence to believe that you have something to offer, and yet it's difficult when you're getting praised all the time and told that you're a wonderful performer to not be proud of that. So, let's see. So it's a difficult distinction to make, first because music is such a competitive field. We have to have confidence to believe that we have a place on stage, that we have something to offer, that we deserve to be there and have something to say. And second, because we're reliant on others' praise, critique, and adulation for our success, or at least our perception of our own success, pride can easily creep in, making us think that we're great because of our own merit or something that we have done. You can see why the distinction is slight, because you must believe in yourself and your work, which is confidence, knowing that you've put in hours and hours of practice for understanding and security, but ultimately that it's not really about you. It's about the music. It's about you being a medium to communicate the music to others. About 10 years ago, I was attending a camp called the Perlman Music Program up in New York, run by violinist Itzhak Perlman, who you might know. It was an honor to be there with a small group of other musicians. I was working on Walton's viola concerto, and the first movement came quite naturally to me, but the second movement was fiery and spirited and very fast, and certainly pushed my high school technical abilities to their limit. Needless to say, I was absolutely terrified when I got on stage, much too aware of the famous faces in the audience, especially Perlman himself. What would he think of me? And the other students, what would they think? Many of them I knew were already touring and had management contracts, much beyond anything that I had. I played the opening theme, about 5 lines, all okay. I was playing by memory for the first time. Then, At the pivotal moment when the same motif came again, up a fifth, you know where there's a little detour and you could go one way or the other? I went the wrong way. And of course the pianist who had our music went the right way. So we had to stop and start again. Yes, in front of everyone, famous and not. Looking back now, I can only laugh to see how scared I was, and yet in the moment I thought this was an absolute disaster, maybe the end of my career. I learned so much from that experience, the importance of utter preparation, especially if it's a stressful concert, the importance of confidence in yourself and that preparation that you've done, knowing you've put in those hours, and the absolute wreckage that pride can do. You see, I think I was so concerned with how others would view me that I couldn't even play the music. It was all about me. It wasn't about communicating something or sharing an idea. I was there to communicate music and to make it come alive to my audience, but I was in the way. I want to talk briefly just about connecting, how to connect to the audience. What Diaz said that I quoted at the beginning, his questions to me. Why is it important that you're playing and not someone else? What do you personally have to offer? What do people know about you after you play because of how you play? As Diaz pointed out, it is important that I am playing and not someone else. At the end of a performance, hopefully the audience will know a part of me. They will have had some insight into my imagination through the medium of the viola. My playing is a combination of who I am, of my life experiences, with the composer's experiences and ideas. I have no wish to superimpose myself on a masterpiece, though in moments of weakness, as I shared in that story, I do. But it's inevitable that some part of me will be visible. It's crucial that a part of me is there, that I'm willing to give a part of myself to the audience and trust that they will appreciate what I have to say. It's a risk. You put yourself out there in performance and you let yourself be judged by your audience. And sometimes they'll love it and sometimes they won't. But if you never risk anything, they have nothing to love. They have nothing to connect to. Regardless of the response, I want my playing to be authentic and a reflection of who I really am. This leads to a further point, which is, I believe to be a great artist, you have to know who you are. You must have dug deep within and examined your life. Those moments of joy or immense suffering, analyzing them, and using them to express the emotion that a piece is attempting to communicate. Something that cannot be done merely through technical mastery of notes alone. That will never communicate that. The audience can smell inauthenticity from a mile away. I'm sure you've all seen concerts where it's overdone. It's clearly just a little technical showpiece. And it doesn't, while it's impressive, it doesn't mean nearly as much as if you feel like you've understood something through their playing. The audience is there to be wowed, yes, of course. You want to play well technically. But also, they're there to hear something transcendent. They're there likely and hopefully to be transported for even those brief minutes to another world. Through the music, you can close your eyes and be taken somewhere else. Or they can experience a different emotion than they've been feeling. On stage, I wish to give my audiences a true expression of emotion, something real that they can come along with. If the audience sees that I see something profound in the music, maybe they'll lean into it to see it too. Humanly, I want people to applaud, love my playing, think that I'm talented. But more than this, I want people to know that I consider music a gift. When I'm on stage, I'm giving a part of myself through the music. Yet everything I have comes from the Lord. The beauty of the works themselves, and also my ability to perform. I've tried to make praying, as Ron just did, a part of my warm-up routine. And I have to just add that this is such an amazing gift that never experienced before in all my concerts, to be able to pray and collectively dedicate it to the Lord. It's just a really amazing thing that we shouldn't take for granted. But I guess I've tried to make it a part of my own warm-up to pray before and to dedicate it to the Lord, that it's not about me, that I'm not going on stage for my own glory, but that the praise may be entirely for him. You may know some of you that Bach dedicated his works he would write solo Deo Gloria, to God alone be the praise. And I hope that can be true of my own playing. Now let's talk a little bit about confidence, a word I've mentioned already, and that ties a lot into what I've already said. As artists, we're so dependent on approval and lauds that we're constantly wondering if we're good enough, if maybe things aren't coming our way because we just don't have what it takes. These thoughts, I'm sure, have certainly crossed all our minds. Being a competitive field, you're always taking auditions and, wondering, am I going to be the one that gets through or gets the part? Several years ago, I was playing at a festival in England, and the format was such that invited artists would gather together for 10 days in a beautiful scenic area on the coast and just play chamber music together. It's like a dream come true. I was playing a piano quartet. I was the youngest by quite a bit, the only American, the only student. Time and time, as we rehearsed, things seemed to be wrong, and others looked at me, discussing and suggesting possibilities. At first, I thought that it must be my playing that was the problem. I was the youngest after all, and maybe I wasn't doing things quite right. But after several hours of rehearsal, I realized we were just having a discussion. We were just bouncing ideas off each other openly, or that's what they were doing. There was nothing personal about it. There are myriads of ways to play the same phrase, the same piece. And so putting that together, the ability to discuss something openly, still confidently knowing that you have good ideas. In order for others to play with you, you have to put something out there. There has to be something for their idea to rub against. If you aren't saying anything, they can't say anything in response. And playing chamber music, you're constantly saying something to the other people that you're playing with, and they're responding, and it really is a conversation. So through that experience, it was such a discovery to me that we were just having an open conversation. And it had nothing to do with our level or our ability to play, but it was just exploring musical ideas together. And with no one's pride and confidence being wounded in the discussion. I want to talk just a little bit about how we prepare for being on stage, because I think that's something that very much is related to confidence. So, regardless of the amount of time you have to get ready for a particular concert, sometimes it'll just be a few hours, sometimes several months. What are some of the important aspects of preparation for performance? And what are the things that will make the performance satisfying to you as the artist and also to the audience? First, I think quite apparently, you have to master the basic technical demands of the work. You learn the notes and get the feel of the work into your hands. If it's Mozart, you may be figuring out gnarly passage work, and if it's Schnittke, you're likely counting 7/8 while counting ledger lines that seem to be infinite. I'd say that this stage of preparation takes some thought, but primarily it requires just focus and time to internalize the notes and rhythms. Second, and more difficultly, you seek to understand the intent of the composer. You begin by breaking things down to understand the structure, asking which phrases are important, understanding how a note or pattern forwards the main idea, how one theme is linked to another. You ask what moments are momentous, what needs emphasis, and why. If everything's important, then nothing is important, right? The best teachers I've had, and I already mentioned Diaz, among others, have forced me to explain why I am making a particular musical decision. Why stress a particular note or phrase and not another? They didn't always ask because they questioned my idea or because what I was doing was wrong, but because they wanted me to understand my own opinions. They knew it is by this dissection and understanding that I would truly own the idea and make it my own, which of course adds another level of confidence to your playing, knowing that there's a reason behind every action. I admit that this dissection has been one of the hardest and yet rewarding things for me through the years as I worked with wonderful artists and teachers. You see, I often had a natural sense of how things should go, but if I broke that down, I couldn't really explain why I was doing it. And that's what they wanted. To know why, you have to break things down into their smaller parts. Phrases, subphrases, individual notes. Of course, the danger in doing this musical autopsy is exactly that. You seem to kill the natural life of the music. You seem to lose the innate sense that you once had, the lifeblood of the piece. Not to worry though. From my experience, it usually comes back, sometimes painfully slowly, and sometimes in a burst of inspiration. When you've analyzed, studied the score, and played the same two measures in every way imaginable, the musical pieces of the puzzle sometimes, usually, start to reassemble. At this time, instead of being a collection of random notes that just happen to be beautiful, there's a sense behind the notes. There's an understanding of what the composer intended, and a sense of why a phrase has to be a certain way. Your conviction as a performer is so much stronger. The audience hearing you will have no doubt that this is the way the piece must be. Have you ever experienced that? Hearing someone play in a recording or a live concert and thinking, my goodness, I never thought of it that way, but that is so obviously the way it must have been intended. I remember a long time ago, I don't even remember when, but hearing violinist Victoria Mulova play with the Minnesota Orchestra. She was playing Shostakovich's first violin concerto, and being awestruck by her interpretation, her dark, brooding sounds, sometimes harsh and sometimes so cold, and it was just these extremes that made me feel like I was actually cold in like a Siberian winter, or it was so vivid and yet it wasn't always beautiful. And I thought, my goodness, this must have been the way that Shostakovich himself felt when he was writing this. It was so persuasive to me. She truly owned that performance. So I think there are moments of discovery like that, even in listening, in knowing why. Well, there are moments of discovery in the process of figuring out why something has to be that way. And sometimes they're in the practice room, and sometimes they're on stage, in the moment. You've played a passage hundreds of times maybe, and yet sometimes it just suddenly feels new. Given that the piece is truly great and there is more and more to explore each time you play it. Each time I play a piece, I find something new. It will never be the same. How else can your performance and your interpretation feel fresh to an audience if you're playing it for the 100th time? They're hearing it for the first time, and in some way you have to make that new to them. In some ways, of course, the first performance has the highest stress. Can you just get through it? It's exhilarating. You're on edge, your adrenaline's running. But by playing multiple times, you have confidence and freedom to make discoveries on stage. Depending on your personal state of mind at that particular moment in life, you'll see things differently than you would have before. Perhaps you've just taken a walk by a lake in the early morning and experienced great tranquility, or won a competition and know the feeling of being on top of the world. Each emotion you feel, you can harness and use in that moment on stage. And not only in that moment, but you can harness the experiences of your life. Like I was saying earlier about knowing who you are and yourself, being able to harness so many of those experiences and use them to communicate the gamut of different emotions that you come across in the repertoire. And I don't think that's an easy thing to do, to just be able to dig down and say, here's this experience I had, but then to draw from that and say, this can become part of a piece from Bach that was written 300 years ago. It's really incredible. Obviously, you play each work with a degree of awe, especially that you as an individual can put some of these personal experiences into music that was written in all of these different time periods. It's said that by age 16, the great Russian pianist and composer Rachmaninoff could sit at the piano and sight read or transpose anything. Yet when he decided to become a real concert pianist, he took 2 years off to learn the repertoire before playing it in public. I think that shows his awe for the music and his desire to respect what the composer had written. My guess is that while he could have relied on natural talent to bring him through, he could have sight read in concert, but he wanted to understand his own musical ideas, to have a reason and deeper understanding of the way things must be. One thing that distinguishes a truly great musician from an amateur, I think, is their ability to structurally conceptualize a piece of music as a whole and not in just fragmented parts or note by note as you would when you're sight reading. Rather than playing note by note, they have a whole structural framework in mind that allows flexibility and nuance on the level of the phrase while maintaining the unity of the whole. So you have this conception of the whole piece. And I think at almost any great concert you hear, you'll find that. Now let's step back for a minute and ask a question that I've asked myself many times, and I'm sure you have too. You're about to walk on stage for a concert and you feel nothing. You don't feel any nerves, no anxiety, no joy, no excitement, just blank. Maybe you've done this is your 5th night in a row, and it's just, you're tired. Maybe you've just had exams, something else happened in your life. You're not in the mood. I ask, can you still give a compelling performance? Is that possible? I recall one night several years ago, I was playing the Clark Viola Sonata at Curtis. It was my first year again, and people had said that this was the most unforgiving stage you'll ever perform on. You're the most critiqued you'll ever be. Oh well. The cameras were rolling for later broadcast on public TV and the house was full. I waited behind the double doors to go out, tuned, dressed, and prepared, yet I felt nothing. None of the usual jitters that hit me right before walking on stage, the nerves that usually give me a little bit of an adrenaline rush and extra edge during performance. I was on stage the full half hour, fully engaged, fully conscious of each decision, enjoying myself. Yet I remember getting off stage more than anything I had done on stage and feeling nothing, thinking only, well, it's over. All that preparation, and now I'm done. Guess I'll go home. There had been no major errors, and the audience seemed to love it, but it was meaningless to me. Horrible, isn't it? Thinking it through later, I realized that I cared who was in the audience, that I wanted to know them in some way, and I wanted them to know me in some way. I think my point here isn't that you should play for yourself, regardless of audience, but rather that you have to find ways to connect and engage with your audience. They are there listening to you, giving their time to hear your ideas and your music. Without them, our music making would be only our own, with no one to share or appreciate it, no one to be touched by it. On stage we give, but we receive too. The audience is actually a critical component of performance. They give energy. Without the audience, I would, as I said, just be playing for myself. And here I have the opportunity, or we as performers have the opportunity, to act as guides, leading the audience through these musical labyrinths that they may not otherwise understand. So, kind of tying it together, I guess, bringing it back to confidence and what that is in performance. As artists, we're dependent on ourselves, who we are personally, our abilities, our preparation. I'm more concerned with communicating through music and people knowing me through that medium than people just judging me for that skill that I have. I stand in awe of music. These great works we have come alive and become new again and again. I'm humbled to serve the music. I think that we all should be. And to serve my Creator through this incredible gift that He has given to share with others. 2 years after that opening lesson I told you about at the beginning with Diaz, I walked off stage after playing my graduate recital. Hadn't been a perfect performance, but it had been full and absolutely delightful. I knew that I had communicated to the audience. We had a rapport. I felt that they had enjoyed it, really, truly. Diaz came backstage first and looked at me and gave me a hug and just said, "That's it. You're ready."